What is going on, everyone, and welcome to r/Malicious Compliance. Now, in today's first story, an art teacher tells OP that in his opinion, their artwork is absolutely disgusting, but in reality, it's pretty good, and what happens next is truly insane. My teacher called my work bad, and my attitude even worse. It then got featured in the biggest art gallery in the country. For some context, the school I go to is well respected in my country, so it was not uncommon for venues to request to display a student's work, or to ask for students to sing live for them. On the occasion in question, the largest art gallery in the country, Gallery X, had asked my school to submit inspired art to be out on display. The school agreed and said that they would submit 5 pieces of work, 1 piece per year for years 9 to 13. Now back to the story. I hated art growing up, but it was a mandatory subject until you got to choose your subjects in year 10. Needless to say, I dropped the subject ASAP. Despite hating the subject, I still put effort into my work, and some of it wasn't that bad. However, at the same time, I would not hide away from expressing my views when we were given a task that I didn't see a point to, even if the teacher was in earshot. Needless to say, my relationship with the art department faculty wasn't the best. My teacher at the time particularly had it in for me. He was one of those teachers that has the view that their subject should be your most important subject, regardless of your future ambitions. If he thought that you weren't prioritizing art, then he would make your life heck. Yet again, I hated art as a subject. He knew this, but I would still do any work set to the best of my ability. We had just finished a project where we had to mix different pigments to create our own unique color. Being colorblind, I struggled a lot, as I literally could not differentiate between half of the pigments. I gave it my all, but ended up giving up halfway through the project. My teacher hated me for giving up. In his defense, he had tried to make it as easy as possible for me, but I hated the subject and saw a way out, so I took it. My teacher, though, was beyond mad. When we went to hand the project in, he gave me a lecture about how I need to put in more effort and work harder because the quality of work was unacceptable. Remember, I literally couldn't even see half of the project. Once that project was finished, my teacher told us that Gallery X has asked that we create some inspired art. We were basically shown 5 different paintings that we were supposed to recreate in our own way. There was a big fuss about this. People were saying that art schools would be giving out scholarships, that there was a $10,000 reward, and other nonsense that 14-year-olds make up. But nevertheless, everyone wanted to be the one that had their painting in Gallery X. So, for the next month and a half in my art classes, we would work on our piece. After the first week of working my piece, the excitement of the new project wore off, and so did my eagerness in lessons. My teacher noticed this and went from complimenting my work to yelling at me about what I was doing wrong. By the 4th week, I was over the project and just wanted to be done with this. With 2 weeks left on the project, my teacher pulls me aside to tell me that my work isn't good enough and I need to improve it. I tried to improve, but he kept on belittling me. So, out of arrogance and spite, I made art my most important subject until the end of this project. I dragged myself to each lesson, quietly working myself to the bone, counting down the days until the deadline of the project. After what seemed like a year to 14-year-old me, the second last lesson arrives. This lesson was not for final touches or anything like that. My teacher had decided that he should review what each student has done well and where they could have improved. He walks around the classroom, complimenting everyone's work until he gets to mine. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I'm pretty sure none of it was positive. I do remember, however, how he finished talking about mine. You can tell that OP hasn't given this any thought and hasn't taken this seriously. That stung like a female dog, because yes, I had lost interest in it, but I had still worked hard in lessons and given it my best shot. The bell then went and I sulked out of class with my tail between my legs. The last lesson finally comes, and I can't wait to be over with this stupid project. This lesson was the big one too. The judges from Gallery X were coming to school to judge all of the work. They come into our class, do all the formalities, these all look so good, I have no idea how we can decide on only one, etc. Then they start walking around the room muttering to each other. The whole class is stood silently at the back trying to hear what they are saying. They do a full lap of the room, then walk back over to my spot. I don't even notice this, as I had tuned out after they had looked at the second painting. They then ask the teacher whose work they are stood over. He he looks at them almost in disbelief as he gestures to me. I snap out of my daydream and just smile politely with no idea what is going on. The judges then confer for a while my teacher and I frantically try and figure out what is going on. Finally, after about 5 minutes of mumbling, they say that they want to shortlist it to potentially be shown in Gallery X. I look on at them in shock, then yet again smile politely and say thank you. I cannot begin to describe the look on my teacher's face though. I don't think I've ever seen someone more confused, angry and disappointed all at the same time. My teacher then begrudgingly thanks the judges and walks them to the door. He thanks them again as they leave and then stumbles back into class. He doesn't even congratulate me on my work. He just defeatedly says, "Good work everyone. As a reward, I'll put on a documentary for you all to watch." And he did just that, not saying another thing until the end of my class. Later on that week, I got an email from Gallery X asking for my permission to display my work, of which I happily said yes to. So, to sum it up, the work that he disrespected and said that no effort was put into was selected ahead of 192 others and got featured in the biggest art gallery in the country. Well, that is just incredible, OP. For someone who doesn't even like art as a class, you've done amazingly well to put all that time into it and, be rewarded for your hard work and end up in Gallery X. That is incredible scenes. I've got to say though, this is such good karma. Imagine being this teacher, right, and thinking, oh, you know what, I know so much about art, I'm an art teacher, and if none of my students are putting in the maximum effort into my class, then you know what, I'm not even going to bother with them. I'm not even going to talk to them. They're disrespecting me. And then people that know way more about art than you from Gallery X coming into your classroom and saying to you pretty much, no, you are wrong. Your opinion of art is actually wrong. We're going to pick the person's art that you thought was the worst in the class. Like, what does that say about this teacher? Surely at this point he's thinking to himself, you know what? I actually must know nothing about art after all. Surely at that point, this teacher is just reconsidering his entire career as an art teacher. I mean, come on, how embarrassing is that? Now moving on to our second story. Gets fired, ends up with promotion instead. This story comes from when I used to work for a global big box store that may or may not start with a W. As an aside, they also aren't known for how well they treat staff either. At the time this happened, I worked in the storeroom, unloading trucks and bringing stock to the floor to be stocked by the overnight crew. Our shift at the time was 3:30 PM to 12 AM. Our store manager made it clear that no overtime was permitted to be worked, anything over 9 hours by company policy. Now this meant at the latest we had to leave by 12:30 AM. We usually cut it close because we were chronically understaffed for various reasons. I knew this night was going to be bad the moment I arrived. We had 6 workers scheduled, yet 2 called in sick, including the shift lead. This meant that I was put in charge as I had the most experience, and the day shift managers all loved me because I worked my butt off. I then checked our delivery schedule and it showed 2 semi-trucks, both with over 2,000 items each that needed to be unloaded, in addition to another truck that was expected to have 20 plus pallets of stock. This meant we had over 4,000 items that needed to be unloaded by hand with only 4 workers to do it. In addition, we were also responsible for scanning items out of overstock bins and bringing them to the floor if the system detected an item needed to be restocked. Sounds like a lot of work. Needless to say, the shift sucked. We didn't get our first break until almost 10 PM, and around 7 PM, the system dropped about 350 items that needed to be scanned out of the overstock bins, and there were almost 200 bins we would need to search for all this stuff. Now, as the shift lead, the fact that we were so behind was my fault. It definitely didn't have anything to do with being overworked with unachievable time targets. So, the overnight managers arrived at 10:30 PM, and one of them went ballistic and yelled at me. Cool, whatever, I don't care, I'll just leave at 12 AM. So here's where the compliance comes in, to a point. 12 AM comes around and the manager refuses to let us leave. Doors get locked with keys only the managers have and alarms are set. One of the 4 of us is a college student and has an exam at 8 AM, so they let him go. 12:30 AM rolls around and we start to leave. Again though, we're not allowed to leave by our manager. Keep in mind that overtime is not allowed, and after 12:30 we were in overtime. One of the 3 remaining of my crew has childcare issues, so they let him leave. At 1 AM, the overnight crew goes on break and the doors are unlocked so the manager can smoke. My only remaining crew member just walks out and the manager lets him go without an argument. I was working, so I didn't know until after the doors were relocked. 3 a.m. rolls around and the night crew goes for lunch. I'm fed up with my manager's attitude, as he's been harassing me for the last 2 hours about not being done, without offering any help. So I decide that I'm going home. But as I walk out the doors, the manager is standing there. "Where are you going? Are you done?" Nope, still about 20 pallets to go out and about 80 overstock items to be picked from the bins. "We'll go back and finish then. You can't leave." I'm already 2.5 hours into overtime. I'm going home. "Do we need to go into the office and talk about your poor attitude and lack of work ethic?" At this point, I'm fuming. "Oh, screw you, manager. I'm going home." "Don't come back. You're fired." "We'll have fun explaining to the store manager why you fired me. I'll be sure to tell him all about the shift tonight." I then left and went home. About 5-ish hours later, at 8 a.m, I get a phone call from the store. It's the store manager and he wants to talk to me. "Can I come in for a meeting at noon?" I say, "Sure, I'll be there." I get to the store just before noon and get escorted into the store manager's office by one of the day managers. The store manager says, "I hear you had some overtime last night. Care to explain why?" I explain everything that happened above. "So you left at 3 a.m? "Yes." "And the manager said you were fired, correct?" "Yes." "Yeah, he isn't allowed to do that. What you told me matches what the other night manager said happened. As a result, the manager is being moved to day shift for retraining. You also are not fired. In fact, we need a new overnight stockroom lead, and I'd like to offer it to you. It comes with a $1 per hour night shift bonus and a $1 per hour raise." "I'll take it. I've been trying for this position anyway. When do I start?" "You start tomorrow night if you want." "Great, thank you, store manager." I then went home and told my family, who were quite happy with the turnout, especially my mum, who also worked at the store and was rather fuming about what had happened. Well, yeah, that is justice right there. If you are forced to do overtime locked into your office or your storeroom, that is absolutely mad. I mean, that is like animalistic. That is against all your human rights. Physically locked into a room. Wow, that is absolutely crazy. If you are forced to do overtime and then not get paid for it, that is so not on. I mean, yeah, that overnight manager deserves to be fired, right? I know it didn't happen in the end of the story, but he deserves to be fired. That is, it's not even just against his job protocol. That is against, everything moral and legal. You can't lock someone into a room and force them to work. That's slavery, guys, right there. So yeah, I've got to say, OP, fair play. You deserve a raise anyway for the amount of work you're doing. And yes, well done. You got a promotion. Well deserved, my friend. Now moving on to our final story of today's video, the professor asked me to share info that I did not want to share. Now just quickly, a genogram is like a family tree but with extra symbols. Example, a beer bottle for my alcoholic father and lines connecting each person. The type of line dictates the type of relationship. Close, smothering, distant, estranged, abusive, etc. That's pretty cool. So I studied social work in school and I found myself doing 3 genograms over the course of my schooling. One for sociology of mental health and then another in my last year. I have some not fun family history and trauma, and so these assignments were never my favourites, but my teachers for the first 2 didn't pressure me to disclose only what I wanted and be vague. One even said I could do a fictional family, lol. The last one though did not. See, one thing we learned was that bringing up a client's trauma outside of a therapeutic environment can be harmful. We were BSWs, which are not qualified therapists. During intakes and assessments, we learned to tell clients that they don't have to give more details than they wanted to. There's a whole host of reasons behind this, but I'll spare you all the lecture. I brought this up in class after this teacher assigned an extensive genogram with an accompanying 5-page essay on what we learned about ourselves. A third of the class expressed the same concerns. His reasoning was, you might be doing this with your clients, and you shouldn't ask them to do anything you wouldn't yourself. Not unless I get a graduate degree and become a therapist or psychologist. The teacher also didn't give us an answer when asked if resources for therapy would be provided, if this brought up any students' past trauma that they needed to talk about. Oh, and of course, he added, this will only be shared with me and is 100% confidential, unless you choose to share. Literally not any of our concerns, but I don't want to share any of my deeply personal business with this man. The assignment itself didn't bother me as much as the hypocrisy of it all. I said, between class assignments and therapy, this will be my 5th one. Could I turn one of those in and be given an alternate assignment? He wouldn't budge though. He said I didn't need to disclose anything I didn't want to, but followed it up with, but I expect you to take this assignment seriously. And when I turned in a rough draft with about as much as I was willing to disclose, he said it wasn't detailed enough. Alright Effa, it's showtime. I have a lot of family trauma that is not mine to disclose, and I rarely ever disclose it, at least not with anyone who would ever meet the folks involved. My own is embarrassing enough, but definitely not as bad as some, but I put all that trash down on there and wrote about it. Then, the following week, the teacher asked if any students would like to share their genogram, if they're comfortable. My hand shot up. I will spare you the details, but I basically gave the class a content notice to allow anyone to leave who may be triggered, a common thing in social work school. And then I just shared all of it. All of the relationships and why they were effed up and why I hate my dad and my sister resents my mum and all that. Cheery smile on my face, by the way, the whole time. The teacher uncomfortably thanked me for my bravery. A few students shifted in their seats, feeling uneasy, others smiled knowing what I was doing. Then, my friend volunteered to share. She didn't like the assignment either, but she's not one to argue with teachers. Her presentation trumped mine. Girl had a real messed up family, and by the end she was red in the face and everyone was super uncomfortable. Next person to volunteer to share was this girl who was in foster care. I'm not even sure if her sharing was malicious compliance, but hers was the most uncomfortable to hear. She started to cry at the end. Another student who also grew up in foster care started to tear up. The teacher cut us off after that. Another teacher overheard, and the following week we had some serious discussions in class. I and the other students who shared were referred to the school's mental health centre, lol. Another teacher I had a good relationship with checked in with me, and I told her what happened. I can't tell for certain what went on, but it created a stink in their department. It's been several years since I graduated, but I heard there is now an alternative assignment for the genogram. So, lesson is, don't tell social work students to do something that you tell them to never do to their clients, and you don't get into social work unless you are traumatized as F. Yeah, I mean, that is a really strange one. The fact that you tell your clients or people that need your help, don't worry, you don't have to disclose all the information about your family history if you don't want to, if it's particularly upsetting or triggering for you. But then your own teacher tells you that no, our clients might want to do this, so therefore you have to as well. Isn't that the whole point, that you don't have to disclose that information if you don't want to? Well, I guess it is, but this teacher clearly didn't care. For this teacher, I'm not going to lie, he's gone completely against the whole syllabus here, surely. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. And the fact that other teachers in that department weren't happy shows that it was not meant to happen. I hope for his sake, and well, for your sake as well, guys, that yeah, he was fired, because that's what deserves to happen, right? Surely. Anyway guys, that is going to do it for this episode of r/MaliciousCompliance. It's actually only my second ever episode I've ever made on this subreddit, so let me know guys down below if you want to see more of it. I've really enjoyed it, but have you guys? That's all that matters. If you have, like, comment down below that you want to see more. If you want more straight away, I think I actually made one video on it ages and ages ago. It'll be on screen right now if I am actually correct. And also, if you are new around here, make sure you hit the subscribe button with notifications on so you never miss one of my daily uploads. Peace.